Hey guys, turkey season is in full swing right now, and if you are planning on getting after it, make sure to pick up some Meat Eater Phelps turkey calls to stuff into the old turkey vest or into your fanny pack right now. I carry a few different things. I like to use mouth calls, and I like to use pot calls. Mouth calls or diaphragms, I like them because it gives you hand-free calling, meaning when you're working a bird up close, you can have your gun on your knee, finger on the trigger, ready to roll, and still be making turkey sounds. I like pot calls because I just like pot calls. I enjoy calling with a pot call. Whatever direction you go, including a box call, which I don't personally use too much, but they're fun and great, and I started out with them. Yanni, on the other hand, one of my main turkey hunting buddies, he loves box calls. And what's funny is I'll now and then look to him and give him the look that means get out your box call and find us a turkey. So it's not that I don't like him. I just have Yanni use his. Then I don't have to carry it. Go to Phelps Game Calls. Get calls that are made in the USA and get calls that'll get them close. Find yours at phelpsgamecalls.com today.
Hey, I'm KC.
And I'm Tyler.
And we are driving
again.
What is happening, y'all? It is a wet spring day out there. It's pretty warm, at least in some places. Where we are in the Midwest, it's still pretty chilly. We are out doing some shed hunting, some turkey scouting, and just laughing our heads off and eating pizzas. Dude,
bad decisions.
We are not sponsored by Red Baron Pizza, but let me tell you something. They're pretty good.
They are so good, man.
They're pretty tasty.
I was very impressed last night.
I ate a whole one. But I
could have, but I'm trying to eat less, not necessarily, I don't know, like I'm trying to eat healthier, but like my main concern right now is to eat less per serving.
Yeah, I understand that. I had quite the death bike / hike yesterday to go pick up a trail camera, so I didn't feel bad about eating as much as I could.
Well, that was courtesy of HTH.
HTH, yeah, which he warned me it's a pretty good haul back in there.
Yeah,
but it definitely was harder than what I thought it was going to be.
I just didn't know that dude would get off in there that far, you know?
Yeah.
I felt like that dude was doing, 300-yard hikes the whole time he was hunting.
Well, he's by himself this time. He didn't have anybody weighing him down.
Yeah, I got you.
No
monkey on his back?
Yeah, exactly. Guys, we just had a pretty cool little video hit the channel. It's about property improvements and just, scouting out maybe if you want to buy a piece of property. We kind of all dream about that. Tyler and I both have actually got to do that in the past years, not because we are wealthy, but because we have sacrificed in other parts of our lives because they ain't making any more land, right, Tyler? Isn't that what they say?
No.
So if you're going to invest, it's one of the best things you can do.
Yep.
We walked around out on your property after you had some really good success this year and kind of assessed things after deer season.
I did a couple of habitat improvements this summer. I got to the point where I almost died one time chainsawing because it was so hot. I literally sweated through my pants so hard that they were sloshing as I walked, and felt like I was going to pass out. And so I stopped. And at that point, I said, "It is just too hot from here on out to do chainsawing work." And so I got a little bit done. I let my pasture grow up into native pasture and let the grasses grow and just kind of breathe, as our friend Adam Keith would say.
And you let your pasture burn down.
And I let it burn this off season too. But it was, it was something that I did a few things that I think helped out. Obviously, the yellow gold is a big factor in killing deer, and keeping them on the property, keeping does around. I talk about all this in the video and kind of the things that I did, the kind of the things that I saw, and then we go in and you and I kind of assess what is going on in the woods, which I hadn't been into since May, since May pretty much,
whenever
or the summer,
shot that pig,
yeah. So
and that was dark.
And so that's that. All season essentially, I didn't go in there, and we learned a few things, but we kind of knew and assumed a lot of things that we saw, and I'm gonna do some more improvements. So I talk about kind of what I did, what I saw, and what the future is on that property.
Yeah.
I got a question for you. It's
okay.
kind of off subject here. How do you feel about a guy or a girl just tossing a cigarette down in the street?
It's not my favorite thing.
No?
No.
Do you think that should be a finable offense?
Now you're really trying to strike a chord of my libertarian views.
What do you think about rolling your window down? Well, wet outside?
It's wet outside.
Can't breathe up in here.
Is that you or me?
No, that's not me.
I don't think I tooted. So, I feel as if people should learn better how to be more responsible citizens. That's how I feel.
Okay.
So I just am not a fan of fines for about near anything unless it is hurting another individual, which you can argue that is hurting other individuals.
Yeah.
Especially if you're out in what's normally the dry Midwest and like all this grass could go up in flames.
I bet that was a feedlot smell. I'm smelling some cattle now.
Yeah.
I think that's a good reason to get rid of methane.
So, yeah, I don't know. But in that video, we talked about some persimmon trees and a little bit of grafting and stuff like that. And quite honestly,
plums.
Yeah, plums too. We're not experts on that. I know a little bit of something about it. Tyler does too, you know, just kind of from fiddling around and doing some internet research and watching a couple YouTube videos. And one of the stars of said YouTube videos is Dudley Phelps of Nativ Nurseries.
Let's go.
Dude, Dudley is a cool guy. Dud the Stud is what I like to call him in, you know.
I think that's what he's known
private.
as in some circles.
Is he?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm about to circulate myself into that. Dudley is a cool dude. We actually have him on the podcast today, and we're going to go like nerd out on some habitat stuff, particularly on soft mast. We spent a bunch of time on soft mast talking about how to increase the food on your property for deer.
For those who are confused, can you explain what soft mast is?
It means mast that's not hard. So it's going to be fruits of the squishy kind.
Gotcha.
Plums, pears, peaches, apricots, figs. All those are soft mast.
Our apricots are one of my least favorites.
Really?
Yeah.
I love dried apricots. Man. They're so good.
Not me. I like pretty much every fruit, but that is one.
Man.
I mean, I'll eat them, but they're just. I'm never gonna buy them. You know what I mean?
But we technically really spend a lot of time on the deer specific stuff. Which would be like plums, pears, persimmons,
crab
for sure,
apples,
crab apples a little bit. You know, all that stuff.
Yeah.
Because we're trying to get deer on our property, and also you can always put a public land spin on this thing, because if you're out there, and there's two things that you can find on public land that are soft mast. Actually, there's a lot, but two things that we talk about in particular that we want to get on our private properties, but there is quite a bit of on public, is persimmons. Y'all have heard us talk about that, I know. We're going to need to make a persimmon shirt that's a persimmon color, because I'll wear that.
Oh, let's do it.
If you do it before us, we will hunt you down.
Hunt you down.
So, and we're pretty good hunters. Big hunters right now, too.
We are.
So,
we're solid for sure. Worried about the large shirts that we put on.
So persimmons and actually deer pear. You can find that around some, the further east you go especially. What are you laughing at?
Otherwise known as dare.
Yeah, it's true. Dare to dream. Anyways, we do a deep dive on that. Actually, also talk about some oak tree stuff, but we'll let Dudley get into that.
Yeah.
Guys, we mentioned that YouTube video. What we need you to do right now is go subscribe on YouTube, because I know we're all hyped up about turkey season, and that's like the next thing. Today we're shed hunting, but we're definitely looking for turkeys and whatnot, because we're going to make a big loop. Actually, kind of two loops.
We've already seen turkeys too.
We have today, man. Successful day.
Mm-hmm.
We're going to do a lot of videos on, or not on turkey hunting, but of turkey hunting this spring. And we want you to be able to enjoy that on YouTube. So it would really mean a lot if you haven't, to go subscribe on YouTube, because that's going to help us out a lot. Yep. Also, just as a public service announcement, we've had a lot of interest from a lot of brands in partnering with us for, you know, all the stuff that we do, whether it's, you know, podcast, YouTube, social media, whatever. And we've really thought a lot about that stuff, and we are going to take on some partners this year. So you might hear a few ads along the way in the main show here. Not today, but in the upcoming days. But let me tell you, we really tried to select and make sure that we partner with people that we know that you'll appreciate and won't get just snooze fest about some type of pole barn that we're trying to sell you or something like that. You know what I mean? Like, we're going to partner with some legit brands that we love to use, and we think that you'll benefit from too as well. So we'll
then
make
again,
sure.
if a pole barn company wants to pay us a lot
of money, because I would like a pole barn one of these days.
Yeah,
which I think is normally the pitch. Like, I don't have one now, but one of these days I will.
Yeah.
That's usually the pitch on it. So.
And it'll be the best.
Yeah, exactly. So, I hope that y'all don't mind that too much, but we're definitely not going to make it obtrusive. It's going to be flow and be a part of what we do.
I mean, these are things and products and companies that we deem as having good products, obviously. And I've told every single person I've talked to that we want to do right by the listener. We try to deliver entertainment, but as much as that, we try to deliver informative information or, videos.
That's what I'm talking about.
Informative videos. And we want to make sure that we're not misleading anybody. So the product has to be good. So we've made sure and test some of these products, have them sent to us. We wanted to find the best one and partner with that person, and obviously people who also have the same values and principles that own the companies, right, that we do. And so we're trying to keep those things in line, and these are products that we use, so these are most of these things are going to be pretty much pivotal to what we do. And so hopefully, not to just keep going on and on about this, hopefully you guys are okay with it. It's kind of what we feel like is the necessary next step for us to continue traveling around and making money and staying married.
Yeah, and shooting big deer.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
We were talking this morning, and I'm going to toot Tyler's horn for him. Tyler
Come on now.
Tyler killed $5. That ain't weird, all right? I can toot somebody's horn without it getting weird.
It's 2021, man. Tooting each other's horns.
That's right. Tyler killed $5 this year, right?
Yeah, I think so.
3 of them were Pope and Young, and the fourth one there was close. Good buck. 3 Pope and Young bucks. 1 Texas big game order, a buck, right?
I think so.
And actually probably 2 qualifiers. You don't think you've...
Yeah, it's true.
Yeah.
Yeah. Heaven.
And 2 of those bucks were over 150. One of those 2 was on public land. So...
Yeah.
I don't know if Tyler's ever going to have a better season, but we're going to try. And we got some gear that's going to help us kill big deer.
Yeah,
so, with that, I think we should talk to a dude that might help us kill some big deer as well. Dudley Phelps is going to let us know about that deer candy. You know what I'm saying?
Dud the dude, baby.
Dud the dude. Dud the stud. Mr. Dude, Dudley Phelps.
All right, so now on the phone we've got Dudley Phelps. Dudley is a part of the Gamekeepers podcast. He's also the man at Nativ Nurseries. Dudley, why is Nativ Nurseries the spot for you?
Well, that's a good question. I encourage people to do what they love, and I did kind of fall into this, and I love it. I grew up with a garden. I had a grandmother that was really into biology and plants and things, and was good at the scientific names. And then I grew up hunting with my dad. He passed away when I was pretty young, and we had this private land that was. Well, it was a tree farm, but it was a hunting place, and it just kind of fell onto me, the management of it, and that's kind of where it all started. I just learned by doing. I discovered the Quality Deer Management Association probably in about the late 90s, and just couldn't read enough of that, and just reading all these publications that these PhDs write that, work for these land-grant universities. And I was just a sponge. I was soaking it all in, and I was really big on some of these management forums. A lot of that has kind of transgressed into Facebook groups and things like that nowadays. But I'm just like y'all and most all the other listeners. We're just a sponge, and we want to learn as much as we can.
Yeah.
And I love to share as much as I can, but just real passionate about growing things and feeding wildlife and watching trees grow and trying to make them grow faster. And it's a challenge.
You're an interesting guy because you have to have a lot of patience to want to watch trees grow, but you also have to be a little bit impatient to want to perfect the idea of making them do it faster, you know? So, do you feel like, man, I used to be big on forums. I love, like, that forum format on the internet, you know, and just like you said, there's been this big move towards, like, just social media, Facebook groups or whatever, and it's almost like there's some knowledge that got lost along the way. Do you feel like that sometimes?
It seems very... I don't know if flooded is the right word. And I don't like to call people know-it-alls.
Yeah.
I've been guilty of that myself. But you do see a lot of folks getting on there really quick to answer questions like they know the answer. Mm-hmm. And I'm not saying it's going to be, it's right or wrong, but you do see a lot of that, people trying to get the right answer. Of course, there's still a lot of unknowns out there, or we wouldn't be fixated on learning more. But, yeah, it can be a little daunting to the point of where I lurk a lot more than I comment these days.
Yeah, you got to, man.
Because of that. People are so quick to try to knock you, But I'll digress there. But it's a great tool. If you want to learn something, you can just get on there and type something in the search and find it immediately.
Yeah.
Are you?
It may not always be right, but you can read what they have to say and then do your own research.
Sure. Yeah. Are you at all interested in heirloom tomatoes?
Yes, I am. One of my best friends has, he's a garden farmer for a living. And so I've learned a lot about that and the whole open pollinated thing. The new cool thing with heirloom tomatoes is, nobody really wants to spray anymore because, you have to eat it. But you can put these heirloom tomatoes that are a little bit more susceptible to diseases and things. You can graft them on a primitive tomato rootstock.
Oh, my goodness.
And the heirloom tomato will, grow a lot faster, not have near as many problems. So yeah, it's a lot of fun.
That's
blows
cool,
my mind, dude.
Man, we are barking up the right tree here. This is all. So Tyler's kind of a tomato enthusiast, and I like them as well. I'm a fig tree enthusiast, so I do a lot of fig propagation and stuff like that. So
fun.
Yeah, man. So probably not going to find any Ficus carica there at Native Nurseries, unless you're selling in the Mediterranean. But I love figs and doing the whole propagation and grafting and all that. And in fact, you have a extremely popular video on YouTube that's a grafting video that you show how to graft a scion into a native persimmon. Have you been grafting for a long time? Have you kind of perfected that model?
Yeah, I'm a real keep it simple kind of person, and that was a bark graft. I can do a whip and tongue. I'm good enough to do what I need to do for my personal needs. In fact, my mentor, a guy named Ryan Russell from up around Columbia, Missouri, taught me how to do it. And so I just figured I could share that. We don't sell grafted stock, but we like to do things ourselves. So I was happy to teach people how to do that themselves. So, in theory, you can plant some persimmon or apple or whatever in, if you're a private landowner or if you lease land and you're allowed to plant trees, you can put rootstocks in strategic locations. So, we all know persimmons are the fate of many deer. But they're not always in the right place, where the thermals are going to be right that afternoon. But you can put a rootstock in the right place. Look at your topo maps and while you're laying in bed and think about where you're going to put stuff. Plant them, grow them for a year or two, and then come put a female persimmon scion on the top of that, and boom, you've got an instant feed tree that's in a perfect location.
What kind of rootstock are you putting down in that case?
I use, for persimmon, I just use wild persimmon rootstock. Virginiana.
I've got about 12 one-year-olds that I grew from seed that I need to get in the ground this year, because that's kind of my plan is, do you do much whip grafting? Because that's kind of what I kind of thought would be the thing to do, is to get a scion, just straight whip graft that thing. That way the whole tree is just, kind of contiguous.
Yes, you can. And those usually heal prettier and don't take as long. A lot that bark graft you see on my video where the rootstock is, 10 times as big as the scion. It looks ugly for the first few years, and it eventually grows past all of that.
Yeah.
If your rootstock and scion are roughly the same diameter, that's a lot easier and cleaner method.
Can you explain a whip graft? Because there's a lot of people out there that don't know what y'all are talking about.
It's I bet we are confusing a lot of people.
Let's actually go through a little bit of terminology there. So like scion, whip graft, rootstock. Can you kind of explain that whole model?
Yeah. So let's just say you're driving down the road one day and you look over on the side of the road and see a persimmon tree that's just loaded down. Branches are breaking, and you're like, oh my gosh, this thing's it's even ripening a month later than most persimmons I know about, which would be just awesome in the deer woods.
Listen, Dudley, not to interrupt you, but Tyler's got a native persimmon on his property that's dropping just orange gold about November 15th.
Yep.
He just got so lucky. Dadgummit.
Yeah. We've got one we found, and it literally doesn't start dropping until November 1st.
Yeah.
And it
stuff.
literally drops the whole month of I said that wrong. It starts dropping in the beginning of October, and it drops like an indeterminate tomato the whole month of October and the whole month of November.
It's amazing.
Maybe we need to trade some scions.
Yeah, we might need a little swapping.
So back to it, you find this dream tree, but it's like in somebody's yard or, on somebody, hanging over the interstate or something. Not in a good place you want to hunt, but you can take that tree, you can cut a branch out of that tree off of the, most recent year's growth. So a branch tip. You go by like in January or February or early March when they're still dormant, and you take little branch tip cuttings, and then you trim them back to where it looks like a bunch of pencils that you put in a quart Ziploc bag, okay? Mm-hmm. Put that in the crisper box of your refrigerator, and then in turkey season, when things have already leafed out, you can walk around on your place and find young persimmon seedlings. Those are your root stock. So you are using the roots off that plant. And you just walk up to that tree, saw it off, anywhere from like a foot to 3 or 4 feet high, and you graft that branch that you got out of your refrigerator onto that plant. So it is using the roots, your root stock, and then that branch that we call a scion, which is an odd word, they just grow together. For lack of a better way of explaining it, it's like, you lose a finger and you put somebody else's finger on your hand. But in the plant world, it's a lot easier to do. You don't have to be a surgeon. You just have to be pretty good with a knife.
Yeah.
And there's different ways of doing it. This whip graft or whip and tongue is where your rootstock is roughly the same diameter as the branch that you cut off of that parent tree. And So you just think of it as like you're holding a pencil that you're whittling on, and you just make a long cut that's angled, and then you get your rootstock. You make a long cut on that's angled, and they're roughly the same angle, and you just fuse them together and wrap it up with some tape, or I usually just use flagging tape, and come back a few weeks later, and the top piece has started to grow. So, it's called the cambium layer. It would almost be like matching up blood vessels together. And so that sap flow is able to continue into your scion, and that just becomes the tree someday.
Mm-hmm.
Gotcha.
So why can't you plant seeds from a persimmon tree and just expect to get the same thing again?
Yeah, good question. And that's just like genetics with anything. You really don't know what you're going to get.
Mm-hmm.
So you can't plant a Tyler and you get an exact copy of a Tyler. Well, I guess they probably can do that. But you're going to get a mix of two different people.
Mm-hmm.
And with trees, you're going to get the same thing.
You haven't seen his son. It's pretty close. But, yeah, I get what you're saying.
Well, yeah, you hadn't seen little Dudley either. But in the plant world, when you find something that you deem superior, and I always use Granny Smith apple for an example just because it's so everybody knows what a Granny Smith apple is. You plant a seed from a Granny Smith apple, you might end up getting apples that are the size of quarters and are fuzzy. I mean, the chance of you getting a big green apple that you can bite into, that will store on the shelf for several months, and that has that tart, sour taste, I mean, it's 1 in thousands, maybe even more than that. And so by cutting a branch out of a Granny Smith and grafting it onto another apple rootstock, you get that exact Granny Smith every single time.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. Why is that? Do you have an idea?
It's just, all you are using from that rootstock is the ability to get moisture and nutrients out of the ground and pass it on to that wood.
Mm-hmm.
Gotcha.
It's just like rooting a fig. You can stick a fig cutting in the ground and it'll grow roots. And one of the more popular varieties of fig is called Celeste.
Mm-hmm.
Well, it's going to be a Celeste every time. You put somebody else's finger on Tyler's hand, it's still going to be somebody else's finger.
Yeah.
He's just going to be controlling it.
Yeah, exactly. So why, I don't know a ton, but I'm learning a lot about the fig world. And figs, you can, like you said, you can root them directly through propagation, whereas like there's other stuff like persimmons that's like almost impossible. Do you know why that is, or can you explain at least why it's it's smart to go down certain paths of propagation, I guess you'd say?
Yeah. Some plants just root more easily than others.
Tomatoes.
And I'm not, I honestly don't know why that is. I think they're just more aggressive, in forestry and biology and wildlife. They talk about early successional plants. So a tornado comes through and blows everything to the ground. You get all this stuff that comes up and grows really fast. I may be missing the point here, but it seems like more of that, willows, things like that come in and grow fast are a little bit easier to root than others. I think it has to do with, the hormones in that particular species of plant. But I think it's just God's way of letting things adapt. If maybe they're not as reliable about reproducing by seed. And so that's the way they adapted.
I never have seen a willow seed, so I guess that kind of makes sense. No, yeah, absolutely.
There's actually, plants like cactus, that prickly pear cactus that you see all over the Southwest. I mean, it's really all over the U.S., but so they reproduce clonally. You know, it falls to the ground and roots start growing out of it. They make those pretty little red pears that are edible if you burn the thorns off of them. Those are full of seeds. But you can get down on your hands and knees around a bunch of cactus plants and never find any little baby seedlings. But they've just adapted to reproduce clonally better.
Yeah. That's strange, too, because, you know, kind of natural defense. It's, you know, first of all, I appreciate that you gave the divine creation nod there, because we're believers too. So, you know, God did some crazy, awesome stuff to make things go the way they do. And his natural processes are just amazing to me. And it's interesting to me when you start talking about things that do reproduce by cloning themselves, like you're saying. And, you know, usually genetic variation is a great defense against, you know, viruses and other things that plague you know, both the plant and animal world. And it's just interesting to me that some plants, like you said, prickly pear cactus, or like figs, like we were talking about, like, it's crazy that you don't have more issues with, you know, something coming in and wiping them out because they aren't really adapting, at least, or changing their genetic code too much, you know?
Correct.
Yeah.
So we don't know why it always works, but
we're not meant to know everything, as much as I wish we could.
That's one of those faith things, I guess.
That's right, brother. That's exactly right.
Yeah.
For sure. So, you know, you're talking about, you know, more vigorous versus less vigorous plants, and persimmons don't root very well. But,
no,
you know, we graft them.
It's funny. I've seen, we were talking about that, me and some buddies were talking about that the other day. Everybody wants to try to learn how to root persimmon, and I've never seen anybody successfully do it, even using fancy, like, intermittent mist machines, which, you know, just every 30 seconds squirts a little humidity into the air, and they're like in a tent of humidity. And so you can root some oaks using that method. I've always just found grafting to be a little bit easier.
Yeah, sure.
But I have never once heard of someone successfully rooting a persimmon.
So
the beautiful thing is that grafting is just so easy to do.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And they take well to it. I got a couple off of watching your video. I had a couple successes. And so how long can a person expect to be the gap between like a grafted persimmon scion to when you're producing enough fruits to kind of bring deer and other wildlife in?
Well, that kind of depends. So if you take the wood, your scion wood, off of and that's what you're going to do, because you find a fruiting tree that it's already sexually mature. It's making flowers. It's making fruits. So if you're taking wood from a 40 or 50-year-old persimmon tree that already makes fruit, and you're just putting it on a smaller rootstock, that plant can actually try to flower and make some fruit that year. That you probably wouldn't even want that weight on it when you're trying to get it established. But if it's an older persimmon, like that's already 3 or 4 inches in diameter, it also has the root system of a 3 or 4 inch diameter older persimmon. So when you put that stick on it, when you put that scion on it, it's going to get all the energy from that huge root system, and it's going to make it just it'll catch up to the height of that old tree, you know, within a couple of years.
Wow.
Now, if you're to do a whip and tongue graft on a much smaller seedling, on a much smaller root stock, it's going to have that smaller root system. So it's going to grow a little bit more naturally and slow. And it's also going to be site dependent. You know, if you're in this really nice river bottom that's well drained, you know, high site index, good soils, it's gonna become a bigger tree quicker. and it may bring in enough fruits to draw the deer in 4 or 5 years. But if it's up on a hill, on a fence line, and a eroded fence line hilltop, it may be 10 or 15 years before it's making a bunch of fruit, big enough to make a bunch of fruit.
Right.
And specifically persimmon, they're an interesting species. They're very site plastic. They'll go up on top of a poor hill, and you'll find them almost, there's some public land in Mississippi, Panther Swamp, Delta National. It'll flood 3 months out of the year, and you'll find persimmons growing like next to cypress and stuff.
Wow.
So they can handle a wide range of soils and conditions.
Yeah, I've noticed that. We've seen them. We have a lot of lowland in East Texas, a lot of creek bottom floodplain stuff, and we see them down in that stuff, and we see them, the one KC is talking about on my property is pretty much about one of the highest places around in sandy soil, so it's definitely, they'll
grow anywhere a raccoon or coyote will poop the seeds out.
That's right. Yeah. So, I while we're talking about soft mast, and I asked you the other day on the phone before I let you go when we were kind of setting up this call about plums, Chickasaw plums in particular. We've got that's kind of a native to our area, and we see these little groves growing, and basically the way I understand it, I'm by no means an expert, but is there kind of a lot like an aspen tree where they will sucker off the root system, and essentially that these little trees coming off the mother tree are clones of sorts, and I asked you about possibly taking those and cutting those clones off and placing those in different areas to grow more thickets. So you informed me that that's an opportunity to do that. I thought maybe because you severed the root system from the main stem that it might affect it. But are those trees going to eventually create their own thicket? Are they going to sucker out from their root system and create a thicket, or are they doomed to be little runts?
No, they'll make their own root system and spread and turn into its own little clonal colony. And that's one species. We were talking about this a minute ago, but they can reproduce by seed or root suckering clonally. It seems like they're really good at doing both.
That's interesting.
They're kind of a fire-dependent species. These days nobody burns hardly anymore, so you seem to find them on poorer sites where they're not often outcompeted by taller trees. People our grandparents' age used to drive, you could drive around and see them all over the place because there was so much more fire in the landscape and more open fields, brushy and grassy fields everywhere. Now we've just got a lot of trees, and they don't like being growing under the shade of a tree.
Yeah, they like sun.
But they'll spread and be like clumps, and they're great habitat for rabbits and ground nesting birds. Everything likes plums.
Me.
And that Chickasaw plum is the one that our grandmothers made that jelly out of. It's so good.
Yeah. My family usually tries to make plum jelly almost every year if we have a good year. I think last year we had a pretty late frost and it kind of affected the crop, but there's still a few around. I've got on my property, I've got a kind of the traditionals, kind of like that rosy colored plum, and I've got some that are yellow, and I don't know if it's a sport or if it's something a little bit different. Do you have any idea about that?
I'm glad you mentioned that. I've got one out in our parking lot that makes yellow fruit.
That's
and
cool.
It's a Chickasaw plum. It's Prunus angustifolia, same genus, same species. It's kind of like what you see in, let's bring back tomatoes. You'll see a red tomato, yellow, green. They usually, in most parts of their range, they usually ripen red, but you'll find some that will ripen yellow. This particular one I found ripens yellow, and they're a little bit bigger than normal.
Yep, I've noticed that too.
What plums do you guys sell the most of?
I would say probably Chickasaw.
Yeah.
We also sell Mexican, and from time to time we carry American plum too, which people further north are going to be more apt to buy the American plum because they're much more cold hardy. They're really common on these conservation programs, used as windbreaks and stuff like that. In the South, a lot of the quail people buy Chickasaw plum. So that guy that has a bunch of pines spaced really wide, picture Georgia, the really wide spaced pines that they're running fire through every year. They buy up a lot of our Chickasaw plum.
Yeah,
I got you.
It's a cool plant.
And I forgot to mention earlier when you were talking about digging up those root suckers, you can also root plum.
Really?
Some individuals more than others. So if you find a tree you really like, you can try just rooting a few cuttings too.
Well, I need to root some of those yellow ones in too and kind of spread that around.
That'd be cool.
Yeah, absolutely. Do you need to do that with scion wood, or can you do that with any wood?
I have found that the harder, a little bit older growth, so not necessarily the branch tips. They usually refer to it as either a softwood or a hardwood cutting. In my limited toying with rooting plums, I've had better luck with hardwood cutting.
Yeah, I would see that too, just because of rot resistance as well.
And
they're kind of small. The scion is.
Yep, and I've put like an open 2-liter Coke bottle over the top of it as a little humidity tent, and that'll help speed the process up.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. Have you ever wrapped cuttings in parafilm? That's what I do with my figs.
Say that one more time.
So with my figs, I wrap the cuttings in parafilm wax. It's kind of like, it's a play on the paraffin wax idea, but it's wax tape, and you wrap it all in, and it makes a humidity dome that's just right around the cutting pretty much.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, parafilm is good stuff. You can order it online. Started out being mainly used in the medical field, and us plant nerds figured out that
nobody wants to give us anything fresh. We just always got to adapt things,
Right. Yeah. So it's almost think of it like Saran wrap. It's similar to that, but it works a lot better. It allows a little bit of air exchange.
And the buds can break through.
So if you're grafting, you can wrap your scion in parafilm. I do all kinds of little tricks. You can put foil around it to keep that hot sun off of it. One of the keys when grafting and rooting things is you don't want a lot of temperature and humidity swings. So you want to try to keep any change in temperature or humidity to be a slow change instead of a quick change.
Yeah, that makes sense. Just constant environment is easy on things. So you, while we're on soft mass stuff, I see a lot of crabapple stuff, especially for wildlife. And I've always kind of wondered, are crabapples truly a native, or are they an adapted thing from Europe?
Good. Yeah, man, y'all are coming up with some good ones. So there are native crabapple species here in the U.S. Malus ioensis, I think they call prairie crab. It usually ripens green and small. It's more of a Midwest. We've got Malus coronaria. I can't remember the common name of that one. And then we've got Malus angustifolia in the south, which is southern crabapple. I hope I'm getting those names right. I think I am.
Sounds good to me.
It sounds good to me too.
And then we've got all of these. Most apples, the apples you see in the store. The rumor is they all came from a region, Kazakhstan, I think, and evolved in Europe over there, and that's where most of the big fruited selections came from originally. Granny Smith, Red Delicious, all of that. And so some of the more popular wildlife crab apples are varieties like Dalgo, Transcendent, Chestnut, Whitney. They've got a little bit of fire blight resistance, a little bit of scab resistance. The natives also can have problems. The ones we sell are seedlings of like Dalgo, Whitney, the ones I just mentioned. And they actually breed pretty true to type, and that's the more lingo, meaning that you plant a seed from a Dalgo, you're usually going to get a fruit that looks kind of like a Dalgo, which is pretty uncommon in the apple world. Crab apples are a little bit more true to type.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
So
one thing I tell all the crab apple folks is, and back to what we were talking about earlier, I want people to be successful. I'm not going to try to sell you something that I don't think is going to work. My rule of thumb with apples and crab apples is if you can drive around out in the country and look at people's yards, if you see apples growing, then that's a good place to try some apples and crabs. If you don't, chances are you're going to have disease problems and you're going to have to spray every week.
Makes me so sad.
When I'm at my farm, I don't want to be riding around feeling like I've got to spray stuff. I want to be doing habitat work. I want to be doing some burning or maybe working on some of my roads, or I don't want to be spraying insecticides everywhere when I want my turkeys to have bugs to eat on,
Yeah.
So
well, we don't have turkeys, so
plant things that are,
kill the bugs.
I want to plant things that are adapted to my area that aren't going to require a whole lot of extra time.
Yeah, absolutely.
What about deer pears? Is that similar to a crab apple, or is that a native species in our area?
The deer pear, to my knowledge, I don't believe there is a Pyrus species that is native to the U.S. Most of there's pears from Asia and there's pears from Europe. I hope I'm right on that. The deer pear that we offer is a European pear, so it's going to be like, think of an old-timer planted a kefir pear in their yard for canning. In the South, we call those hard pears or canning pears. They're really resistant to fire blight. They're not the best to just pick off the tree and eat, but they're pretty good. But yeah, so most of what you see is deer pear, which is like the dime to golf ball size pears, is a seedling of a European pear.
Okay.
So that European pear fell on the ground, sprouted, and became its own pear tree. And it may grow a few thorns. It's almost reverting back to more of a wild tree. And the deer absolutely love them. Human standards, they're not the greatest. But what it isn't is that wild calorie pear that's got such a bad reputation. So it's not. It doesn't have that the European pears don't have the invasive reputation as the Asian pears.
Yeah.
Calorie pear is like a rootstock that got free or something like that, right?
It started as Bradford pear, which is a landscape ornamental that was a clone, and it's Pyrus caloriana, which is why they call it calorie pear. There was another variety called Cleveland Select, I believe, which looked just like a Bradford. And when they introduced those other calories, they were no longer a single clone, and they were able to sexually reproduce. And now you've got birds spreading them all over the place.
Not good. Yeah. Every time I drive by a ditch and I see them, there's a place here in a local town where they kind of took over this little creek bottom area, and it just makes me mad.
Yeah. I personally try to do the native only thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We live in a free country, and we have rules, and you can get what you want. I choose to be a native only kind of guy if I'm planting stuff at my farm.
Native nurseries, man.
Yeah.
That's right.
What other soft mass are we missing, man, that we haven't talked about too much?
Persimmon is king in my book. If
me
they're,
too.
Indigenous to your area. There's a lot of unsung soft mast out there. Black cherry, I think, is very important. Deer eat them, turkey eat them. They're great for pollinators. They're great for bees, insects. I had a professor at Mississippi State that said turkeys will move to find black cherry. They will get mobile. If there's an area that's 3 or 4 or 5 miles away that's got a ton of black cherry on it, they'll move when those cherry are dropping and single them out.
Mm-hmm.
I've got a lot of that on my property, but it all seems to be male. I don't really know if are they, dioecious, is that the right word for male and female?
Dioecious? No, they're not. But they kind of fruit at a funny time of year, and it happens quick.
Gotcha.
It's in a lot of places it's like June.
Uh-huh.
So a lot of people aren't necessarily just out and about scouting in June unless you're pretty hardcore.
Tough time to be outside in East Texas.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But they fall at a time of year when they need it.
Yeah.
Red mulberry is a soft mass that I'm a big fan of. Not the Asian white mulberry, but the native red mulberry. They are dioecious. So you've got to plant, they're male and female.
Mm-hmm.
They can start producing fruit when they're 2 or 3 years old. And they're a really late spring. They're the first thing to come and drop, come into fruit and drop. In fact, some of these states that have a late ending turkey season may have mulberries dropping at the tail end of turkey season.
That's what I'm talking about.
And they're also an excellent deer browse. I've joked that I wish a food plot company would figure out how to, you could buy mulberry seed by the 50-pound bag and fling it out. And just mow it back every year. Deer just devour it.
So they love it. Is it nutritionally beneficial for them?
It is.
Yeah.
It is.
High in protein?
I've heard of Marcus Lashley, who's now at the University of Florida, has mentioned mineral stumps, where you can cut down a bigger tree and let it stump sprout. And because it has such a big root system, the deer key in on it. I don't know if it's able to suck up more minerals. When stumps sprout, they come back with so much vigor because you've just basically cut the entire tree down, but it has a monstrous root system. So for whatever reason, that is more palatable to a deer than a seedling mulberry or a seedling elm or whatever.
Yeah.
Let me ask you this: Do mulberries do well in full sun usually?
They do.
Yeah, because we see them in the woods and the road ditches a lot. County road ditches and stuff. But I don't see, or just haven't noticed, I guess, a lot of them in full sun. But was wondering about that.
They kind of frequent the edge. They don't get big enough to make it in big hardwoods. And so where I usually find them is like on a power line or a gas line or any kind of tree line where they are able to lean out into the sun.
Is that everbearing mulberry? Is that native?
Illinois everbearing is a cultivar of mulberry that is actually a hybrid between the native and the Asian. So it's a half red, half white.
Okay.
Ah, gotcha.
And
they can actually cross pollinate with white, and they introgress back. It's another cool word. They kind of migrate their genetics back to the white mulberry, to the Asian invasive mulberry.
Yeah, that's interesting. I know where
Deers
there's
still love to eat them, though.
Yeah.
You know.
Oh, people do too, dude. I mean,
I know where there's
Yeah.
a tree that surely was not human planted. That's a white one. You know, I kind of always wondered how it got there. So I wonder if that had something to do with, somewhere along the line it was, a bird dropping from one of those trees or something.
Oh yeah, they're for sure spread by birds.
Yeah. What do you think is the top soft mast if you wanted to eat it yourself and also wanted to have wildlife production out of it?
The first thing that came to mind was pawpaw.
That's what I'd like to hear.
Just because I love to eat those things so much. But they're just not that prolific. I don't, they don't make a whole bunch of fruit. I'm probably just going to have to go back to persimmon on that.
Yeah.
And I know chestnuts are hard mast, so we're kind of cheating a little bit on that question. But that would be another good one that would be kind of a dual human. And since I'm kind of cheating here, brassicas are another good one.
Hey, now
you
you're
can
talking.
eat out of your food plot.
Yeah,
but
sugar beets.
Mast, gosh, plums are another good one. Pears.
Yeah. Absolutely, all the good stuff, man.
I'm getting hungry. I didn't drive through Whataburger like y'all probably did.
Oh, I'd like to get to the chestnut stuff a little bit in a second, but can you talk about pawpaws a little bit more? Because I kind of have an infatuation with them. We're like right on their edge, so we don't have them a bunch. We went to Land Between the Lakes this summer, and they were everywhere, and we weren't there at the right time of year. But man, it's such a cool fruit. I've done a lot of research on them, watched a couple documentaries, and read some on them. They're just so different than anything else out there.
Yeah, and they've just been right under our noses, and they just hadn't been the cool fruit. They're so popular now. There's so much. There's like this backyard food movement going on. And pawpaw is up there at the top. They don't. The reason you don't see them at the grocery store is they really don't keep well, and they bruise really easily. They ripen quickly, and they come out of they rot quickly. But man, they're so good to eat. And a guy recently, there's a guy named Neil Peterson who has done a tremendous amount of work on pawpaw. The land-grant university in Kentucky, I think that's Kentucky State, has done a lot of work with pawpaw. They can be a little bit finicky about where you grow them. They like bottom ground, so they like to be like on a creek bottom. They don't like wet feet. They like really good drainage. And they like a lot of organic matter in the soil. So if you're going to grow them in your yard, you almost need to provide a garden-like environment for them. Almost like a raised bed or something. Where you've added some organic matter, or you make this big old hipped up row. But you can type pawpaw production in Google and look at some of the images of how people are growing them. A lot of times it'll be on a hipped up row that's looks like or you could build what looks like a little pitcher's mound to grow it on. They like that elevation, which helps with aeration and drainage. But So I don't think it's the kind of thing that I would just go out and just plant a bunch of for my deer. I'd kind of, I'd lean more towards persimmons and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
You can grow them where you guys are. That may be on the edge of their range, but if you can find a site like that, then they'll grow fine. Or you can make a good site for them to grow on.
Well, I might have to do some amendments. I've got a creek bottom, but it wouldn't say it's well draining down in there. So maybe if I mound up a hill, I could plant one, down in there.
You could plant them like right at the base of a hill.
Yeah.
Where you get that colluvial soil where it's eroded over time down to the bottom of the hill, and it's just kind of a deeper, better soil right there would be a really good spot for them.
Yeah, that's cool.
They can be finicky about high winds and a lot of sun when they're young, so some people will kind of plant them in a little bit of shade and then cut the trees down around them as they get a little bit older and get used to it. But you see these commercial folks that are trying to get involved in pawpaw, and they're just planting them in full sun in rows.
Huh.
And they're doing great.
That's cool. Yeah. Well,
there's a little arboretum on the Mississippi State campus that has some, and gosh, they're like 15 by 15. They're just these huge, massive bushes.
Huh.
That's cool. That's not anything like I've seen them in the wild. They always kind of look tall and spindly, like they're reaching for sun.
And they're always in the understory.
Yeah.
But if you see like where a tree fell down a few years ago, and they get just a little bit more sun, they respond to that really well.
Yeah.
They found their competitive edge in the understory of hardwood forest. That's where they best compete. You may be able to grow one faster in full sun, but in the wild, that's their little niche.
Yeah.
That's where you'll find them.
Very cool. Well, while we're talking about eating stuff, and you've made persimmon your selection. That's your final answer, I'm guessing. Can you talk about astringency a little bit and maybe how, that's a thing for humans but not as much for wildlife?
Right. I've heard Toxie, who's, my boss, the founder of Mossy Oak. A deer, their brain is more connected to their stomach than humans are.
Mm-hmm.
And
depends on which human, I think. But
yeah, I can eat just about anything.
Me too.
A deer will gobble up a green persimmon, but if you take a bite out of a persimmon that's just not completely mushy, you want to spit it out. It almost feels like you put dirt in your mouth.
Your mouth turns inside out.
Or you got a piece of chalk off the chalkboard and chewed on it, and it's an odd feeling, and we call that astringency. What happens? I'm not really sure of the exact process of what makes it go away, but you can freeze persimmons and thaw them out and help make the astringency go away. You can even soak them in alcohol if you want to make the astringency go away.
I think that might just be numbing the astringency.
That was called moonshine.
Yeah, might be illegal in some states.
Or you can just wait and let time make that astringency go away.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But deer don't seem to mind about that.
Yeah.
And some humans are a little bit more sensitive than others to that. But and then there's, individual persimmons are more astringent than others.
Mm-hmm.
There's some Asian varieties that, where the fruits are as big as a baseball or a softball even, where you can eat them when they're still hard and there's no astringency.
Yeah. I have a few in my yard that I hope to get that from.
And I get a lot of questions, while we're on that, are the Asian varieties better for deer? And they seem more appealing to some people because it's a bigger fruit.
Uh-huh.
But in my experience, they almost never fall off the tree. So if you're willing to go pick a few 5-gallon buckets of persimmons out of your yard and carry them and throw them down, and that's legal, then great. But I prefer a huge American persimmon tree that may drop 100 or 200 fruits a day.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely.
You know,
well, I think that goes back
those
to
Asian ones don't get that big. You know, but
those non-astringent Asian ones are kind of. I think they're bred for, they're cultivated for human consumption. And I read a little bit about this, and you might know more. But the reason they don't drop is because they bred for that. Because to be picked, they would rather have them on the tree, and that way they're not falling on the ground and getting exposed to predators or whatever. It's much better if you're talking about human consumption to have things coming off of a tree as opposed to off the ground.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And while they may taste a little better to us, it really is hard to beat a good American that's non-astringent.
What's your favorite name varieties of American persimmons that you've tasted?
Let's see here. That's escaping me right now. Just any wild one really that's good and mushy. I have not played a whole lot with other than the ones I've selected myself from the wild.
Yeah. Do they all taste about the same?
There's a man named Jerry Lehman. I hope I'm pronouncing that properly. And he passed away recently, but he did a lot of work with American persimmons. And there's another guy, I believe, named Claypool that did a lot with American persimmons. And if you can get your hands on some of those varieties, a lot of those were chosen for early maturation. So they mature early, maybe way before us as hunters want them to mature.
But
they may be bigger. Proc is a good one. There's one called Early Golden, which drops like super early. But it may be good for, putting your cameras on. So I'm real big on drop times.
Yes.
Are you trying to have, I think this is probably an obvious answer, but you're trying to have something for deer to eat year round on a property, essentially. So you're trying to essentially work into all the gaps with whatever you're putting on your property a lot of times.
Pretty much. Yeah. So out of my offerings, you got mulberries coming down at the end of May, and then there's some oak species that, gosh, I'm still driving around and seeing nut-all oak filling trees. They don't even start dropping till like Christmas.
Wow.
And usually it's January and February is their peak time. But, so basically all fall and winter long, when there's not a whole lot of browse and stuff.
Yeah. Let's talk about oaks a little bit, actually. K.C. and I are very interested in oaks. We've also very confused, too, at times. Can you graft different types of oak scions to oak rootstock?
You can. They're a little bit pickier. So there's some people call them subgenus or a section. So you've got red oaks and white oaks, and they're in their own taxonomic section. So they are not compatible with each other. You've got to put a white on a white and a red on a red. So northern red oak, you can graft it onto a Shumard because they're both reds. You can graft a water oak to a Shumard because they're both reds. You could put a white oak on a post oak, or a white oak on a bur oak, or a swamp chestnut oak on a post oak because they're all in the white section.
Yeah. So as long as it's red or white, where you pretty much can match those up. That's cool.
Can you kind of give the redneck version of how to tell the difference in each of those?
Yes. White oaks they don't have what are called bristle tips on the leaf margin. So, for example, everybody knows a white oak, I hope, but it's the fingers or the lobes on the leaf are rounded. Red oaks tend to be pointy, and they have what's called a bristle tip, which, if you look at it really closely, it looks like a little thorn sticking out of the tips of the leaves. And even that is not expressed a lot. Like you don't really find bristle tips frequently on water oak and willow oak, but you can if you look closely. And then you've got live oak, which can have pointy bristle tip looking edges, so it can be a little confusing. And then one of the other main things about red versus white is a red oak, it takes 2 years to grow and produce a viable acorn. And a white, it takes 1 year. So my buddy Ryan, who I mentioned earlier, who taught me how to graft, he's also a big-time oak enthusiast. He kind of coined, I believe he coined the phrase acornet. So a red oak, it will flower, and it's got male and female flowers on the same tree, and it will make an acornet that first year. It's just a little bitty acorn on the end of the branch.
It's like a donut.
But it will have the acornet from the year before, lower on the branch. Those are the ones that mature and drop that year. And then that little acornet on the end of the branch, it has to grow for a whole nother year to get big enough to mature. Whereas a white oak, it flowers, makes the little acornet, it becomes the big acorn and drops in the same year.
Our nomenclature is the same on this, but I'm going to clear this up because we have a lot of Michiganders who listen to this. An acorn is an acorn, in case you're wondering if you're listening. But we call them acorns.
Acorn, pecan, pecan.
Oh wait, well, are they pecans where you're at, or pecans?
Yeah. And I called them squirrel cheese when I was a little kid, so call it that too.
That works. Oh, that's funny. So, on the oak stuff, I heard a guy one time, I can't remember who it was, but as a person who I respected their opinion, he said that...
few and far between.
Yeah, that's few and far between, so we'll see. But he said that if you can get anybody who deviates any further than white and red in classifying oaks, then they're blurring the lines a little bit, because he said that almost every oak you see is a hybrid of sorts. Do you see what I'm saying, and do you kind of agree with that?
Yes, and I've heard that before, and I tend to agree with that somewhat.
Yeah.
Toxie and I are just fascinated with finding these hybrids out in the woods. When I'm driving around or walking around, I'm always one of the reasons I hardly ever limit out in turkey season is because I'm looking up at trees half the time.
I know the feeling.
And so, gosh dang it, I forgot what I was saying.
Oh, you're talking about hybrid oaks and how you and Toxie see them.
Yeah. So, but they, you'll find a hybrid, and sometimes it'll just look 50-50. Sometimes it'll look almost just like a white oak, but you'll see the edges of the leaves may not be as rounded. That may have a little bit of overcup oak in it, or it may have a little bit of bur oak in it, or something like that. And so I agree, there are blurred lines. And because they can pollinate each other, they're going to cross, and then they're going to back cross, and they're going to introgress. And I know I'm using technical words, but you're not going to just have a bunch of 50-50 hybrids everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
You know?
So when you say hybrid, you're talking about within the white oaks, they're hybridizing, and within the red oaks, but not cross red oak to white oak, obviously, right?
Correct.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I have found trees that you know, just maybe but there's going to be individual differences too. You know, every tree is a snowflake. They're that's another Toxie quote, but they're gonna.
But not in the way that people used to make fun of people nowadays, right? That doesn't mean like
right.
a little soft person.
Right. But there are going to be minor differences from one white oak to the other, but there also may be major differences.
Yeah.
But just because some of them have smaller acorns than the others, they're still a white oak. But yes, you may have something. And I really believe this. You may have a tree that's got 5% post oak in it, and you can't even really recognize it.
Oh, I see stuff like that.
They generally seem to introgress back to looking almost exactly like a white oak. I think that's why we have so much variation in the oak woods out there, and so many different oak species out there.
Are you a grouper or are you a splitter when it comes to speciation?
Mm.
You know what I'm referring to? So that you get these two groups, you know, people who are like, well, you go back to the people when people were naming dinosaurs, right? Everybody wanted to name one after themselves. So you have a whole bunch of stuff. Well, ends up, a lot of those are just juvenile versions of the real thing, you know, and there's not as many species out there as some people like to claim. So,
gotcha.
You know, there's kind of there seems to be a little argument in the scientific community sometimes when it comes to this stuff.
Yeah, I had a teacher that was just set on it. You know, this is this is that. You know, there's no variation or very little. But I'd like to think that, you know, there's change going on all the time. You know, so I don't know if you'd put that me in the grouper or the splitter category.
We're going to call you an independent. How's that sound?
Yeah,
it's okay to be third party, right?
That's right. Yeah.
But you know, you guys are are good buddies, but y'all are a lot different too.
Yeah.
And y'all are both Homo sapien, but you're a lot different. You know. And when you get close and look at trees, and if you're infatuated with them like I am, you can notice more subtle differences from tree to tree if you get down and look at them really close.
Let me ask you this, Mr. Independent. Where do black oaks fit into all this?
Well, blacks are in the red group.
Okay.
Or the red section.
Okay. So, what are some defining characteristics of black oaks for people that may not know what we're talking about?
Black oak is an upland red oak that's usually on upland sites. You know, it kind of looks like a northern red. It kind of looks like a shoe-marred oak. The acorn's a little bit smaller. It has what's called imbricate scales on the cup or the cap, which means they're loose and they're not just stuck to the cap. That's one of the main identifying features. But it's got a little bit more tannins than, say, a northern red does, but deer will still gobble them up. There's another one called scarlet oak that's closely related to black oak, I think. It's also an upland species. You probably find that on a little bit drier sites. And there's another one called northern tin oak, which some people call Hills oak, which is also really closely related to black oak and scarlet oak. And in some areas, the species lines with those can be a little bit blurred. There's also a black oak out in California, which is a totally different oak species. But, that's why common names can be confusing.
Yeah.
Why did
you're referring to the black oak, I assume, that is in the eastern half of the
yes.
US.
Why did the Sierras become like a line of delineation? You know, like those California oaks are a lot different, but then the Rockies are a much bigger mountain range. You know what I mean? It's always kind of perplexed me.
Yeah. It's just, you know, I think we're getting back into this God stuff.
Yeah.
It's hard to understand, but it's just, I think it's just another barrier, and things form differently over there. But yeah, you go over the Sierras, it's almost like you're in a different country looking at plants.
Mm-hmm.
It's just really odd.
Well, speaking of the different country thing, you know, Native Nurseries is you know, the business you run there, and you know, y'all kind of hang your hat on putting native species back on the landscape, and it's pretty awesome. The term native itself, I mean, with the E, not the cool one y'all have without the E, but that's always been an interesting word to me in general, because I can sell a like a Quercus texana, what, you know, like that's going to be native. That's a Nuttall, or well, sometimes it's not either. I don't know. You can tell me. But anyways, a certain oak tree that is native to Texas, but it is not native to Minnesota. But I can call it a native because it is within the U.S. So where does the line of native actually lay? You know what I mean?
You know, and this is a hot topic, and it can actually get a little ugly here, depending on, you know, people's opinions.
Yeah, cut them red cedars down, right?
You know, it's native somewhere. You know, we're all here on Earth. But I think where you know, I don't know, and my opinion has changed. It's gone back and forth on that. There's another word called indigenous that I think should be more important, which, you know, I think in layman's terms, that's just, you know, where the tree is from. You know, it's indigenous to the north half of Mississippi and southeast Arkansas or whatever. So it is native to the U.S. or the continental north, you know, whatever.
Yeah.
But it's indigenous to this small area here. I think that's the real thing we need to be looking at. But defining if something is native to a country is I don't know. That's a little odd to me.
Yeah. Yeah, it's weird.
It's really hard to define, and there's a lot of opinions out there. And it can get pretty heated, you know, when you start talking about invasives and non-natives. Well, I mean, I really don't know what the right answer is, but somewhere the line I kind of draw is this moved by humans or not? And I think if there's ever going to be a definition, it needs to be somewhere in that realm where, you know, if this seed gets in the air and ends up flying over the ocean and lands in the U.S., then that may be a natural, you know, godlike process. Whereas somebody goes on a plane to Asia and buys something over there and brings that seed here and plants it, and then it gets invasive. That's like a human-induced change there.
You know what's
wouldn't have happened 500, you know, or wouldn't have happened several thousand years ago.
Yeah,
I guess it could have if somebody made some kind of crazy
real ambitious.
You know what?
You get the point.
What somebody needs to do is find a way to bring those Japanese strawberries over here. Have you heard about those?
No.
Okay, so there's a strawberry that they grow only in Japan. I believe it's Japan. Don't quote me on any of this. And it's like they sell for like $8 a strawberry, and they're like supposed to be the baddest strawberry out there, but like the you can't buy them. Like you can't get them because they don't want them to leave the country of Japan. I think they're just now going to open a restaurant in New York that sources them, but like.
Oh my goodness!
Yeah, you should check it out,
brother. I ain't paying $8 for a strawberry. I don't care
I would try it once. I would try it once for sure.
That's
man. I tell you what, I have eaten wild strawberries before in the Rockies, backpacking, and it's like you concentrated 30 store-bought strawberries.
Oh, man.
That's cool.
I agree. I hadn't had strawberries, but I've had raspberries. Same situation, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah. They are pretty good.
A lot of times the wild version is even better than the domestic version that
absolutely.
we've tinkered with.
You know, this is maybe I'm a little bit, I don't know, maybe I'm a little bit out there, but I really do think that people don't quite understand the responsibility that they hold in their hands whenever they purchase a tree from a nursery or from a big box store or whatever, and the idea of like what you can be doing to the native landscapes. And I know I'm kind of like getting on a soapbox or whatever, but you know, you're talking about bringing stuff over and that process and whatnot. Like, I'm completely removed from this physically, okay? But when I read about the chestnut forests that used to be in the eastern U.S. and about the chestnut blight and all that, I mean, it just brings tears to my eyes to think about the damage that was done from some type of foreign exchange bringing in new species of plants, you know, and that's just one of many that are out there, you know. I mean, you're talking about the Callery pear, or, you know, around here it's Chinese privet that just or Japanese privet or whatever it is that just, you know, takes up landscapes. And people, a lot of it starts with, well, I want to have a better tasting fruit, or I want this pretty bush in my yard. And, you know, I don't know. It's just, it's weird to me.
Yeah, and I think, you know, it's oftentimes, you know, well-intentioned. It's just not necessarily well thought out. You know, it's just like when you go in the woods and, you know, public land and justify littering. You know, people do things that they think is going to be okay, but they don't really think about how it's going to affect the next person that comes along. And so I think we just need to lead by example, and you know, and I really don't know what the rule is, or you know, what's right and what's wrong. It's hard to figure that out. You know, once again, it's native to Earth, it's native to our planet.
I ain't sending it to Mars, right?
So there's, you know, I guess each individual just has to think about it and make their own decision.
Yeah, that's kind of my policy. Just don't do anything that's going to impact other people.
There's things in the hunting world that we could get off on a tangent about, you know, decoys or, you know, taking long shots. I mean, there's so many different things where you have to make a decision on your own for your life, and think about, is this going to affect other people or whatever? But ultimately, that's your decision to make.
It's good to listen to other wise people before you make the decision, I think.
You know, and you can learn by other people's mistakes too. Which I think we're seeing a lot of that in you know, you walk around in public land and see privet growing everywhere.
Yep. The deer eat it though, so you know, hey, I guess there's something.
The deer eat it though. You know, we got this Kogan grass down here. Invading, you know,
COVID grass,
more coastal plain stuff. But,
I hadn't heard of that.
You try to run a fire through some pines with Kogan grass, and it burns so hot it'll kill the pines.
Oh,
you know?
That's bad.
Yeah, that's rough.
Not good.
Well, let me ask you this as we kind of wrap up. What's the you know, you talk to a lot of people in regards to managing a property or their particular piece of land or the landscape or whatever you want to call it. What is the one piece of advice that you like to give people when it comes to managing land to benefit wildlife?
Awesome. And that's a really good finale here. Don't try to do something all at once. And you know, I'm confident that most of these listeners are like us. You know, half the time you're daydreaming, you're thinking about stuff you want to do, you know, when you're hunting or on your land or on the public land. And I'll have folks call in and be like, I want 500 of this tree because I heard it was awesome. And, I want to say, why don't you try about 10 of them and see how they do? So I want people to come up with like a 5-year plan or a long, what are your goals and what's your long-term plan for this place? And don't try to do it all overnight, because you may come up with this awesome plan. I'm going to put this cover here. I'm going to plant this switchgrass, or I'm going to strip disc that, and I'm going to burn that, and I'm going to plant these trees down in this bottom. And Nuttall oak is my favorite. I'm just going to plant nothing but Nuttall. And then 5 years later, they're sitting in their deer stand, and they're like, oh, my gosh, what have I done?
Mm-hmm.
I wish I had done a little bit at a time and staged this. So, if I'd only planted 10 or 15 trees in this field and realized that, this is my favorite afternoon spot, and all my thermals are going straight to these mast trees that I just planted because I didn't think about it before I did it. So come up with a plan. If that means not even doing anything for 2 years and just riding around and looking at the place, and consulting with friends, or consult with another biologist, or call me, and get different opinions, and don't try to do it all at once. Come up with a long-term plan.
Yeah.
And how you're going to implement it.
That's good, man. That's
and
kind
that
of
way you can make minor tweaks as you're going.
Yeah.
right.
That's great advice, man. I think that, honestly, calling you when I purchased trees a couple years back, it was kind of eye-opening, because I had my heart set on some crab apples, and you told me, it's like, man, if you don't see apples around, same thing you just said on this podcast, then probably not good, and I didn't do it. And I, appreciate the advice. And, as a, good old boy biologist, I don't always have all those answers, and it's nice to talk to someone who does. And I tell you, the other thing is that my plan that I had for my property 2 years ago is completely different than what it is right now. So I think if you make a 5-year plan and do a little bit along, you'll learn a lot, and you might not make some big financial or otherwise mistakes that you would jumping in with everything you were going to do right off the bat.
Right.
Yeah.
And there's so many things changing these days. Just a few years ago, we thought that culling bucks worked.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, and it was just, there's so many things that are supposedly set in stone that change with science and with all this data. And so,
yeah,
just go with baby steps. Come up with a plan to implement, but do it over 4 or 5 years.
Yeah. Exactly.
I think if I was kind of going to give advice in the same vein, it would be spend all your money on the property. That way you don't have any money. You only have like a little bit that you can do every year. You know what I mean? So buy the property up front.
Buy the best property you can right off the bat.
That's right. Don't leave yourself any money to work with for a couple of years.
Yeah. Well, Dudley.
And then you got people that get too much land and don't have enough time to do anything to it too.
That's it, man. Yeah. Well, man, you're a wealth of information, and I could probably ask you another 3 hours worth of questions, but we probably all need to go to the bathroom and eat a bite or two. So if people are interested in more, learning more about this stuff, or want to pick your brain about something, or somebody else there at Nativ Nurseries, or just are interested in getting some trees, where can we send them?
Well, you can go to our website, nativnurseries.com. It's without the E on the end of native, but the other way will get you there too. Oh,
y'all are smart.
There you
go. You can call me at 662-494-4326. And then we've also got a podcast, Gamekeeper Podcast. I'd love to get one or both of y'all on there at some point.
Sure, might have to do it, man. I don't know if we're good at keeping them, but we can we can talk about it.
Yeah, that'd be awesome, man. Like KC said, we appreciate you coming on, man, and might have to get you on another time so we can talk other things, because like KC said, I got a lot more questions, but I know we gotta get on with our days. So appreciate your time, man.
And if y'all ever get close, give me a shout. Let's go see if we can do some freezer filling.
Man,
that's what I'm talking about.
Sounds
brother.
like a plan.
I know you know where those big old eastern birds are over there, so we might have to come let you show us what's up.
All right, I'm down.
Sounds good,
man. A little bit, not a lot.
All we need is a little.
Thanks, Dudley.
All right, y'all be good. Have a good one.
That was some Studley information. Oh, man. Thank y'all for listening. We would ask you if you enjoyed that, man, or if you've been enjoying the podcast and you're not subscribed yet, make sure and subscribe here on Apple Podcasts. That helps us tremendously, especially if you leave us a 5-star review. That's a help, that a debt that we cannot repay. But we really do appreciate all the support that we've had from you guys over the last 4 years doing this podcast, over 4 years now. It's been so many episodes that KC and I sometimes are like, oh, yeah, we did that one too. How cool is that? Like we forget some of these things. And so, there's definitely times where we go back and listen and try to learn information. And, this will be one of those podcasts, I think, going back, trying to glean through everything that Dudley was able to tell us as I go forward working on my property. And like we said, we just released some YouTube videos, so make sure and subscribe on YouTube to see those, but also to see the turkey stuff that's going to be coming out here in the next month to 2 months. It's going to be a good time. There's going to be birds chirping. There's going to be birds gobbling. There's going to be snakes striking. There's going to be all kinds of stuff happening. So we're excited about it. We're going to go find turkeys right now. Thank y'all for listening. And remember, this is your element.
Living it.
Hey guys, turkey season is in full swing right now, and if you are planning on getting after it, make sure to pick up some Meat Eater Phelps turkey calls to stuff into the old turkey vest or into your fanny pack right now. I carry a few different things. I like to use mouth calls, and I like to use pot calls. Mouth calls or diaphragms, I like them because it gives you hand-free calling, meaning when you're working a bird up close, you can have your gun on your knee, finger on the trigger, ready to roll, and still be making turkey sounds. I like pot calls because I just like pot calls. I enjoy calling with a pot call. Whatever direction you go, including a box call, which I don't personally use too much, but they're fun and great, and I started out with them. Yanni, on the other hand, one of my main turkey hunting buddies, he loves box calls. And what's funny is I'll now and then look to him and give him the look that means get out your box call and find us a turkey. So it's not that I don't like them. I just have Yanni use his. Then I don't have to carry it. Go to Phelps Game Calls. Get calls that are made in the USA and get calls that'll get them close. Find yours at phelpsgamecalls.com today.